Ryan Little.
Valentine's Day is steadily approaching, and when you're thinking about getting a gift for somebody, it shouldn't be about how much money you're going to spend on them, but how much time you're going to spend on them. So today I have a very time-intensive dish for you today that you can make for your special loved one on Valentine's Day. I'm going to make a handmade sage pasta with a hazelnut sauce served with some roasted Kabocha squash. So stick around and I'll show you how to impress your loved one on Valentine's Day. I'm going to be making the pasta first, and the recipe I'm using for this pasta is kind of a combination of a recipe from Mark Bittman and another recipe from the Crossroads Kitchen cookbook. So I'm starting out with 2 cups of semolina flour and a teaspoon of salt, and I'm just going to be putting that into the food processor. Because I want this to be a sage pasta, I'm actually going to be adding some fresh sage. It's probably about, I'm going for a tablespoon of fresh sage. I'm just going to be putting that into the food processor to start out with. And I'm just gonna pulse this a few times so that the sage gets incorporated into the flour. All right, so the sage is integrated in there. It'll get finer as I continue to process the rest of the ingredients. For the liquid ingredients, I have a 1/2 cup of hot water. I've already got the water for my pasta on the stove, so I just use that. And this is a special ingredient. This is what I got from the Crossroads Kitchen cookbook. This is 2 tablespoons of red palm oil. Now this isn't the bad palm oil you hear about, even though it is solid at room temperature. This actually does have quite a few vitamins and minerals. The reason I'm using this is to give it the color. So obviously this doesn't have any egg in it because we're making it vegan. So by adding this oil in here, the red palm kernel oil, you're gonna give it a nice orangish color that'll kind of replace the egg yolk. So I'm just adding this to the hot water and just kind of letting that oil melt into it. Now the reason you're gonna use this hot water is because it does have an effect on the gluten in this recipe, which helps the consistency since also we're not having or adding any egg to it. So as soon as this gets melted, I'm gonna be adding it into the top of my food processor so that it can drip down as I process it. So I'm just pulsing this as I pour, and I will, once it's all fully, the liquid has gone into it, then I'll let it pulse a little bit more so it kneads it a bit and comes together into a solid dough. So I've been processing this for a while. My liquid that I had initially, my first 1/2 cup, is gone into it. It's still a bit dry, it's not coming together as a dough yet, so I'm gonna start adding a little bit more water in, just basically a tablespoon at a time. So I've added a couple more tablespoons of water in here, and I know that when I begin to pulse it again here, it's gonna come together as a dough. All right, so just gonna feel this out here. As you can see, the dough has come together. It's no longer sticking to the sides of the food processor, and I can easily take it out and it sticks into a ball. This here is a little bit warm from the blades of the food processor, so this needs to cool off a bit, chill out before I can do anything to it. So I'm just gonna be placing this in plastic wrap, and then I'll be putting it into the fridge for maybe about an hour or so, between a 1/2 hour to an hour, as long as it takes me to prepare the other ingredients. So I'm gonna just wrap this and throw it in the fridge. The next thing I'm going to prepare is my Kabocha squash, and that's what this is right here. This is a winter squash, similar to, say, a pumpkin or like a butternut squash in flavor. It's nice and sweet. The cool thing about this one, you can actually eat the skin, so we don't have to peel it or anything. We're just gonna cook it with the skin on. So I'm gonna chop it up, cut off the top, cut off the bottom, cut it up in half, remove the seeds, and then cut it up into smaller slivers and roast it in the oven. I already have my oven preheated to 375, so that's what it'll cook at for about 30 minutes. I'm also gonna show you a special way to plate this to make it extra special for Valentine's Day, but you'll have to wait for the end for that. So let's cut it up. I'm going to be cutting the top off. Make sure you can get it on a somewhat sturdy angle, but I'm gonna be cutting the top off just so it makes my cutting in half a little bit easier. Just like with other winter squashes, it is quite difficult to cut through. So I have the top off. Try the same with the bottom. Watch your fingers on this. Make sure your knife is nice and sharp as well. All right, so we have the top and the bottom off. This is just gonna make cutting in half a lot easier. See that? The knife goes through a lot smoother. Cut it all the way through. There we go. We just need to scoop out the seeds. So I'm just going to slice these as best I can into little like half moon shapes, about, I don't know, 1/2 to 1/4 inch thick. Again, it's still a little bit difficult to cut, so watch your hands, be very careful, but having it cut in half makes it a lot easier. It's pretty. I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty here. I'm going to be just adding a bit of olive oil to the top, generous amount of black pepper, also a generous bit of salt. Keep in mind you're salting and peppering an entire squash here, so you want to make sure that it's seasoned. And I'm actually going to be adding some garlic powder as well, just to add another bit of flavor to it. All right, now I'm going to toss it all together. Trying my best to make sure that every piece of squash gets a bit of oil, salt, and pepper on it. I did wash the skins before this, or I did wash the entire squash before this, knowing that I was going to be cooking the skin as well, so make sure you do that ahead of time as well. Now I'm just going to lay these on my baking tray, trying to get as many on here as I can. Not sure which will be the best way. I might have to maneuver some things. I might even have to use 2 trays, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna need 2 trays for this. So again, this is preheated to 375. These are going in here. I will set my timer for about 30 minutes, flipping them over about 15 minutes, and we just wait. Actually, we don't just wait. We're gonna make our sauce next while we let the pasta dough chill out. The sauce I am going to be making today comes from Mark Bittman's book, How to Cook Everything Vegetarian. Really simple ingredients, basically hazelnuts, garlic, olive oil, and I wanted to choose a sauce that wasn't gonna overpower the sage flavor of the pasta, and it wasn't gonna try to be something that it wasn't. It's basically a simple nut butter sauce. It's not trying to be an Alfredo sauce. It's not trying to be something else. It is just a really simple hazelnut sauce. So, really simple to prepare. I'm going to start with a 1/2 cup of hazelnuts. These are raw hazelnuts. You could attempt to take the skins off. I'm not gonna worry about it. I actually think the skins are nice. On the other side, it adds some nice flecks of color. So just about a 1/2 cup of raw hazelnuts. And I'm going to throw these onto my cutting board so I can just roughly chop them. I feel like they develop a little bit more flavor when I chop them up, so that they can kind of toast up a little bit more in the olive oil. So they're getting basically cut just kind of in half. I have 2 cloves of garlic already here on my cutting board, so while I'm here just roughly chopping these hazelnuts, I'm going to do the same with the garlic. Not sure what happened to my voice there. I just have a small saucepan here. To that, I'm adding a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And notice I'm doing this in a cold pan. To that, I'm going to be adding my hazelnuts and garlic. Two things are going to be happening. The garlic is going to be infusing into the olive oil to help develop flavors. As well, the olive oil will be helping to toast the hazelnuts and the garlic so that they get a deeper flavor in there as well. So that's basically it. We'll salt it once it's finished, and this is just gonna go onto the stove here, so meet me over there. The pan is on the stove. I'm just gonna put it onto a medium heat. And watch this. I'm not going to step away. I'm not gonna do anything else. I'm just going to let this come up to temperature. What's gonna happen is the oil is gonna heat up. The hazelnuts, the garlic, they're gonna toast. You want them to just get slightly, ever so slightly browned, and then we're gonna turn it off. So again, do not walk away. Watch this, monitor this. You do not want anything in here to burn or things will go immediately bitter. If you do see any large pieces of the skin kind of just hanging out, you can toss that. But otherwise, just watch it, let it go. So this is smelling incredible. You want this to go probably about 3 to 5 minutes, but it's gonna make your house smell so good. That garlic, hazelnuts toasting. Not to mention the kabocha squash you have cooking right below this, which is just about ready to be turned. It's probably been about 4 minutes or so. The garlic, pretty much the same color as the hazelnuts. Smells amazing, and I'm turning off the heat, putting these aside, and I'm just gonna let them kind of cool off for a bit before I throw them into the food processor to turn them into a sauce. And this is a perfect time for me to flip the kabocha squash. It's been about 16 minutes, and they're softening up, you can already tell. I'm just gonna flip these over so they get nice and brown on all sides. The hazelnuts, garlic have cooled down slightly, and I'm just gonna be throwing them into a food processor. If you wanted to do this in a blender, you could. I just didn't want to use my Vitamix for this because I hate getting small amounts of things out of the bottom. So that's why I decided to use the food processor. Essentially what we're going for here is a hazelnut butter. We want to give it the consistency of a spreadable nut butter. It's up to you how thick or thin you want it. I'm going to try to get it as smooth as I possibly can. So gonna stop it here. Obviously it has thrown itself all over the sides of the food processor. That's fine. Just gonna scrape the sides down. So it's actually a good time too to add some salt to it. So I'm just gonna add a pinch of salt, probably close to about maybe a half teaspoon or so. If it does what mine just did. It's difficult working this food processor from this angle. Where it throws it all over the sides again, it's fine. Just open it up, scrape all the sides down, start it again. You may have to do this a few times. Although I do still think that the food processor is the best tool for this job, it has taken me a few times of letting it go, letting it spread out, stirring it down, probably like 5 times before it's gotten to the consistency where I want it. But if we look at it now, if I open it up for you, it is the consistency of a, well, nut butter. So to this, I'm actually just gonna be adding a little bit of soy milk. And what that's gonna help do is just help cream things up a little bit more. And then we'll be ready to just kind of set it aside, let it go until we're ready to put it onto the pasta. So just gonna add that soy milk right now. I'm going to be adding probably just about a 1/4 cup or so of this soy milk. Again, this is just to help it get even more creamy. When we cook it, or when we cook the pasta later and we add this, we're gonna be adding some of the pasta water. So that's actually gonna create most of the creaminess that will coat the pasta. So I'm not too worried about this being more of just a paste at this point. So this is the texture you want. It's thick, creamy, and I'm just gonna scrape this out of here, set it aside. And if you can't get it all out, just grab a piece of bread, because this is delicious enough just to be eaten on its own with some delicious crusty bread. Timing wise, you might want to plan this a little bit different, maybe make your pasta ahead of time. My kabocha squash is done, and I haven't yet rolled out my pasta, so I do have to take this out now before we do that. So here it is, but this is perfect. It's so delicious, it's browning up, it's tender, the skin gets nice and crispy. So these can just hang out. They don't have to be super hot when I serve them, but let's make some pasta. Full disclosure, this is the first time I have made homemade pasta since I have been vegan, so this could be a bit of a disaster, but I have confidence and I think it's gonna come out pretty well. So this is my dough. It is a beautiful golden color, as you can tell from that palm oil, and it has firmed up quite a bit in the fridge. This I'm going to be attacking in thirds. So I'm gonna divide it into 3 portions and basically roll out a third at a time into sheets, and then I'll cut it into, I'll be making fettuccine shape today. I'll be cutting it into fettuccine noodles all together at the end. So let's start. I'm going to be dividing this into 3 equal portions, and I guess I can just do it all right now. And then keeping these other 2 wrapped up so that it does not dry out. Now, don't be afraid to use a little bit of extra flour here. Still using the semolina. This just helps to keep things from sticking. So, first thing is I want to get this into a slightly rectangular shape so that I can start feeding it through my machine. If you do not have one of these or you have an electric one, obviously follow the instructions for that. You could take it upon yourself to try to roll this out by hand. I've never actually done that, but let me know how it goes if you do. I'm starting it out on the largest setting, which on mine is a 1, and I'm going to start to roll this through. And this is where I can tell whether or not I have my dough moist enough, whether it's too dry. So far, it looks like it's okay. So I'm just gonna fold it back together and roll it once again. This is kind of a slight kneading stage, just to make sure that everything is gonna hold together. Actually, it was a little bit thick. Be afraid to flatten it out. So you're about to see a cautionary tale here. If this happens to you like it just happened to me, it's fine, not a big deal. It'll come back together. You just might have to start back at square one. What that means is it was just too thick to go through that level of the pasta roller. As long as the final product is beautiful, it doesn't matter how it looks at this stage. So a bit of a difficult start here. You want to go through each level twice. If you do feel like it is sticking at all, don't be afraid to add a bit of flour. Going to level it up to 2. Again, you want to go through each layer twice. It is a bit jagged now. It's not a perfect rectangle, but that's fine. We'll sort that out later. And every time it goes through, it's going to get thinner and thinner and longer. And you'll see it's kind of exponential. Here in just a moment, you'll see that it's going to grow quite long. Again, making sure that it's floured and it's not going to stick. If it is the right texture and not sticking, you should be able to let it kind of puddle at the bottom without it sticking to itself. So I'm going up to my level 6. which is 1 from the top. This is where things start to get really long, really thin. I'm not gonna go all the way to the thinnest setting because it'll be way too thin for me to cut it into fettuccine noodles. And at this point, it's pretty delicate, but it's the perfect consistency. And I'm going to just lay this out on my table. And I won't be cutting it just yet until I've, like I said, rolled out the other pieces. I've rolled out probably about 2/3 of this dough. This is gonna be enough for me to just show you today how this works. Notice the sheets are pretty long. Some of them are a little bit thinner also. I was noticing that as I was putting the pasta through the machine, it was just kind of overwhelming the machine. So maybe with this particular recipe, dividing into 3 was a little bit too big. Maybe I should have divided it into quarters. But here's 2/3 of the dough rolled out. And again, it's 1 setting from the thinnest setting. So now what I'm gonna do is basically cut each of these in half so that I can feed them through the machine and cut them into fettuccine noodles. To do that, I need to add a little attachment to my machine. And it slides on just like this. I just need to resituate the handle. Before I cut it up, I'm going to be sprinkling these pretty generously with the semolina flour, and I want to do that just to make sure that they don't stick when they come out. This dough is actually a really solid dough, and I think a lot of that comes from the semolina. It doesn't seem to be sticking to itself, so I'm not too worried about it, but I just want to make extra sure. So each of these long strips I'm going to cut in half lengthwise, and I'm doing that just because I don't want super long noodles. So this one's overlapping a bit. The edges, if you can see, some of the edges are a bit frayed. I'll just take care of those when they come out the other side of the machine. If you don't really care about things looking a little bit rustic, you can leave those on there. Otherwise, you can kind of weed them out at the end. So let's just grab one of these sheets and begin feeding it through. If I had gone to the thinnest setting, they wouldn't come out. It actually kind of just perforates it as opposed to cutting it all the way through. Instead, you can kind of remove those edge pieces if you want, but everything looks great. I'm just going to lay these out, being careful that they're not, try to keep them from overlapping as much as you can, but I'm not too worried about them sticking together, so. My mom got me this pasta press, I guess it's called. I think when I was in maybe middle school, I remember us going to the hardware store and picking it up. Still have the original box with the original price tag on it. Comes out every few years, but like I said, this is the first time I've made it since going vegan. So far with this, the smell of the sage, the look of this, I think I might be pulling this out a lot more now. Now that I have what I feel is gonna be a pretty solid recipe. This dough is so good. Famous last words, I guess I shouldn't speak before I actually cook it, huh? My water is boiling, it is salted, so I'm going to go ahead and toss my pasta in. As soon as it hits the water, I want to make sure to stir it around so that it doesn't stick together. And I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. Starting to check it about maybe 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. because this doesn't need to cook any longer than somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes. You do not want to overcook this. It will fall apart. It will become gummy. So again, between 2 to 3 minutes is what you're looking for. All right, so it's been 1.5 minutes. I'm going to just give one a sample. Seasoning is perfect, and that sage is coming through, which is amazing. Glad it's not too much sage. It's perfect, I'm so excited. But I'm gonna let this go just another, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds here. I'm definitely not gonna go the full 3 minutes. All right, so it has been just 2.5 minutes or so, and I'm going to take these noodles directly out of this water and into this bowl. I'm not gonna drain it, because I want a little bit of that water to remain. I'm probably even gonna use a little bit of the pasta water to actually make the sauce creamier as well. So as much of these out as I can. If there's 1 or 2 strays, I won't be too worried about it. Looks like I got them all. All right, as soon as you get the noodles into the bowl, you want to add probably about 2 or 3 tablespoons of the sauce. Again, it's really pasty. Sorry. And just start adding a couple tablespoons of the pasta water. I'm gonna start out with probably about 3. You want to delicately toss this around, letting the pasta water turn the hazelnut and garlic butter into a creamy sauce. I already can tell I'm gonna need some more water here. But you don't wanna be too aggressive because you don't wanna break up the noodles. This pasta water is great, it's full of starch, it's salted, so it's gonna help to season the sauce as well. Looks good. Last thing I wanna add is a generous helping of fresh black pepper into this, and then I'll be sprinkling some other things onto the top once I plate it. I have 2 plates here. Obviously for Valentine's Day, you're probably gonna be serving 2 people, maybe just 1, maybe 5, who knows? I don't know your situation, but I'm gonna show you 2 platings of this. The first one is gonna be the extra special Valentine's Day version, where we make a heart out of the Kabocha squash. I just have 2 of the half moons here, and then a third one cut up, and I'm gonna try my best with my dirty fingers here to form it into a heart. To the center of that heart, I'm going to add a healthy portion of that creamy pasta, trying my best to keep the heart visible. Look how delicious and creamy it is. And you can see the little flecks in there from the hazelnuts. It looks mostly like a heart, right? Next one, I'm just going to do a more classic plating here. I'm just gonna set up some half moons. Pile it high. And don't forget, before you serve it, to clean up the plate just a little bit on the edges. To finish these dishes off, I'm going to take a fresh nutmeg and just grate it over the top, just ever so lightly. And don't be shy, get it on the squash as well. I'm also going to be shaving some of the hazelnut all around the plate. And then lastly, I'm just going to add a couple little sprigs of the sage to the top. To add a bit more sage flavor. And there we go. We have a beautiful sage handmade pasta with kabocha squash, finished off with nutmeg and fresh grated hazelnuts. Over this past week, I thought a lot about what I wanted to do for this video. I was sort of in a rut of making dishes that were pretty much just veganized versions of fast food dishes or restaurant dishes, and I really wanted to just make something that was focused on just whole foods and was made from scratch and really focused just on the flavors of the ingredients that I was using. So I actually went to the library, I went to bookstores, I checked out books, and I sat for hours scouring through and kind of put together this recipe based on a lot of the things that I was inspired by in these books. And that Mark Bittman book, How to Cook Everything Vegetarian, even though it's just vegetarian, it's full of things that you can easily veganize. So I took a couple of ideas and put them together, and here we have this recipe and this dish that I'm really proud of, and it's definitely a crowd pleaser, specifically for Valentine's Day. So I'm ready to give this a taste. I've already tried the components individually, but I'm excited to see what they're like together. And I definitely want to try the pasta with the squash. And the pasta is a perfect texture. I'm really impressed with that. You're gonna love this recipe. So. If you haven't had kabocha squash, you're in for a treat. This stuff is so sweet and so creamy, plus with the addition of the skin, which gives it even just a little bit of body and crispiness, that paired with this dish really just brings out the earthiness of the hazelnuts, and the sage really shines through the pasta and that sauce, which ends up being pretty light actually in the end. I do love the shaved hazelnuts on top also. It has this impression of kind of shaved Parmesan cheese, even though there isn't any cheese or artificial vegan cheese or anything in this dish. So it's impressive. That's all I have to say. So I'm gonna finish this dish here all by myself. And while I do that, go ahead and check out my other videos. Even though they are veganized versions of other restaurant dishes, they're still incredible. And take a shot at those, try making a few of those. And if you do take pictures, tag me on Instagram, #MunsonMadeThis. Next week, I think I'm gonna try to do a dessert video, kind of following a similar idea here of using whole foods and focusing on the ingredients and letting them really shine through. So subscribe to this channel so that you can be the first to know about that video when it drops. Well, I'm excited to dig into this. Have a great week. I'll see you next Monday. Subscribe, like, and share this video so that you can help me grow this channel. So have an amazing week. I'll see you on Monday. Is he?